Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome back, Buck. I know your life is full of adventures and observations and general witticisms. Is there any particular comment you'd like to dredge out of your extensive collection of witticisms to share with our large audience tonight?
Well, yes. Francis Bacon, I believe, reading makes a full man, speaking makes a ready man, but writing makes a precise man.
Okay. I think that's a certain pearl that I think many in our audience will treasure.
One hopes.
Well, as we go forth in our discussion tonight, we have a lot of ideas about the economic welfare of the country, and we're in the middle of an electoral cycle. There are different views about how to make things work. Overhanging everything is the enormous federal deficit, which is something to discuss. But let us start with the ideas about raising revenue. And one idea would be to increase taxes. Another one would be to lower them and put a large tariff in there. That's candidate Trump's idea. And that's not an uncommon story in our country, is it? Tariffs, we've indeed, I think for how many years, that was the only source of revenue.
That was well, at the federal level, yes, that was the principal.
So maybe we could discuss that and the pros and cons and just how that's played itself out in our nation's history.
Well, I'm certainly not an economic specialist. I do know the political fallout that has come from the tariffs in our history. I suppose it starts in our history with the mercantilist idea, which really precedes the labor theory of value. It precedes Adam Smith, for instance, who coincidentally but serendipitously wrote Wealth of Nations and published it the same year as we declared our independence, of course. Prior to that, the idea of wealth, at least the European model, was that it was a fixed amount and it was measured in terms of gold and silver. And in a time of intense imperial and national competition, you wanted more gold and silver in your country than the other country had, which means you had to maintain a positive balance of trade. You wanted your merchants, your farmers, your manufacturers to be selling more to foreign customers than they bought. And to achieve this, you saw countries adopt these artificial trade barriers, protectionism, in the forms of taxes or tariffs that would artificially raise the prices of imports to try to encourage the population to not buy foreign goods. Then, of course, the tariff also serves revenue purpose once we get to an independent United States. And a lot of the fighting was over whether or not the tariff should be low enough to just be a revenue measure or high enough to direct the economy, if you were. And we saw a lot of battles over those that contributed. I will not say caused. There's a lot of revisionist history that say that the Civil War was caused entirely by tariffs. I think any thinking person has got to
believe that's a bridge too far.
Yeah, it really is.
It was tension,
yes.
Sectional tension.
Yes, and if you want to chase that a little bit, the fact that the South was an agricultural region contributed both to its dislike of tariffs, its consumerism, and to the fact that it employed slave labor. So I would say it's correlation and not causation. The same thing that made white Southerners oppose tariffs also made slavery attractive to them, but it certainly didn't cause the war.
Well, just to sort of go through how things evolved, and economic theory has taken steps forward, and in the 19th century, the great idea about free trade was there, and particularly the British imperialism, the idea that the great British Empire could freely trade among its composite parts. And they had let's bring in a lot of inexpensive grain into the UK, and that had all sorts of benefits, and ideas about comparative advantage arose. Do you want to bounce that basketball?
Well, yeah, it's once again the whole protectionist idea, and it's interesting that you should bring this up. I think the audience ought to know we kind of brainstorm on the spur of the moment whatever it is we're going to talk about. Actually, Dr. Robinson probably has a good idea before he comes in what we're going to talk about, but I don't know until just before. So it's sort of like me going through my my graduate school prelims all over again. You've got to know everything and be ready for everything. It keeps me agile, keeps me going. So, but I was actually just rereading about a week ago the Communist Manifesto, and while a lot of it is, shall we say, questionable, I mean, it's certainly been a tremendously influential document. Marx and Engels talk about the spread of imperialism and the spread of the bourgeois mentality and the need for those who control the sources of production to remake the world in their own image, so to export this idea. I'm not sure if that ties so much into tariffs or not, but the idea of the foreign competition, foreign markets, foreign sources of goods. You probably know more about the actual British imperial policies than I do, though.
Why would that be? Buck?
Well, I know that you're a bit of an Anglophile, so several of the papers you've read. So
okay.
Johnson and Pepys and
well, actually, I'll accept the statement. But just going in, I mean, I think it's a rather important conversation right now in our electoral cycle, and in the recent debate, it was a point of contention, and many economists were saying, well, this is not going to, this policy with tariffs is not a good one, and I think President Trump struck back and said, oh, yes, it is, but I think it's been the idea about raising money and protection industry and making things work has really been there for a long time. And in the 19th century, the idea, as people explored this, why not have free trade? And so many people espouse that idea as sort of a cutting edge idea about raising the standards in the world. And the idea would be, with a comparative advantage, is, well, one country can produce widgets and another country can grow coconuts, and if we let those coconuts come in and they can just do better with coconuts, and we shouldn't grow coconuts here. On the other hand, another country, well, we can't make widgets that well. Let's let the country that makes widgets, they can do a better job, at the end, everyone will work out. Everyone's standard of living will rise, and tariffs in those circumstances would be an anathema. And so that was certainly a very common viewpoint. And indeed, it is, and then we can discuss the countervailing argument.
Well, it still is, and it's a type of economic internationalism, if you will. In fact, it may be, at least from a non-religious context, it may be the very first indication or movement towards an internationalist or globalist perspective. So it's not about our country or our team versus their team. It's about sort of a global application of the notion that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think the big countervailing argument to that is that it does divide a particular nation into what Marx and Engels would describe as the bourgeois and the proletarian sections, that big business, that capital and management would throw the labor force of their own country under the bus if they can find cheaper labor in a foreign country. And that means the workers in their own country are not going to be able to compete because they don't do it as well. They're not willing to, or able to work for as low a wage. And so as a practical matter, free trade leads to the huge wealth gap that we've been seeing develop in this country over the past 50 or 60 or 70 years. And I think that's the major downside.
Well, there are many reasons for economic inequality, many of them, but I'm not sure I'd put that ahead of the list, but I take your point.
I'm not head of the list, but I think it's
Right,
certainly a major
yes,
contribution.
yes.
So.
Well, I think I think you touched on an argument against free trade and absence of tariffs would be that the economic benefits would flow everywhere, and along with that would be power and a cultural imperialism. So if you have a very your nation state is great. You've got all the great ideas. You've got all the cutting edge technology. It's being produced in your country, and if you let it be disseminated, even though it might be some transitory economic advantage, then your nation's power will be diminished. And on the other side of the fence, as this technology flows into another area, another country, they may have sinister motives. They may think, well, we're going to produce, I don't know, destructive satellites, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and then we're going to keep our secrets to ourselves, and you foolishly let we're able to obtain this. And the other thing, another point to make, I think, is and indeed, this is what's happened. This is what's happened worldwide. The inflation rate has been kept down in the U.S. Because of free trade or open borders, and people in Indonesia manufacture sneakers, and the price is much less. And in the U.S., the labor force, if you want to say it that way, they're not out in the fields working 20 hours a day, whereas in Guatemala they might be, or they're not so much making tennis shoes and sweatshops. That's in Indonesia, and the pollution and all the environmental degradation is going somewhere else, and then we're getting those cheaper products to our advantage. And the idea is, well, okay, our workforce is, we've got all these people that can't, all the jobs have gone to Mexico or wherever they've gone that require manual labor, and we don't have those jobs. Well, we do have income transference here. So a person might well say, well, I'm not going to be able to go out in the fields and work because it's in Guatemala. What can I do for a job? Well, we'll find something for you to do. How about, let's say working at a TV station, maybe doing that, or some kind of a place for you in our society. And if there is not a place, we'll find a way to subsidize your life.
And that subsidizing now amounts to about $34 trillion, and a lot of that debt is owned by countries that do practice the same sort of protectionism that actually turned this country originally into a global superpower. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to argue with the likes of Alexander Hamilton or even Henry Clay in that regard.
Well, yes, and I mean, it's sort of the idea about the subject that we're throwing back and forth to each other is tariffs protect a powerful nation state.
Well, they protect the controlling interests of that powerful nation state, and then the working class is pretty much going to have to throw itself on the mercy of of those controlling interests and hope that they receive some largesse. And those controlling interests, a lot of times, don't distribute the money; they simply borrow the money. Well, and that's no good for anybody in the long run.
We could keep on that subject. The idea is the quote working class in, let's say, Guatemala. It's not exactly great there. We have plenty of jobs out there in the growing cocoa or whatever, but it's just a pretty horrendous life. Plenty of work at very low wages and a very reduced life standard. And in the U.S., these jobs might not be available, but there is income transference, and there could be displays of extreme want in the country. I don't dismiss that idea, but in general, the system works to keep people, if they want to avoid being in terrible circumstances, there are ways to prevent that.
Well, once again, I would say that you keep coming back to income transference.
Yes.
It's not transference of wealth. The corporate tax, I mean, if you look at the richest 300 or 400 people in America, they are the ones who are not funding the social welfare systems. The social welfare systems are obviously being funded by heavy borrowing. That apparently nobody in Congress has any intention of ever repaying. They're obviously adding to it. And so, you know, I'd say that that's a chimera that we have to explode right there. That you know, that the income and corporate taxes are not nearly as progressive as you would indicate there. And meanwhile, these corporations, capital and management, they are cleaning up while they are moving those jobs offshore. So that's the other
well,
side.
we've actually gotten into a quite complicated discussion here about income transference and borrowing. And so I'll say right now, yes, we mentioned just en passant a little earlier the terrible national debt. Yes. Mm-hmm. The politicians don't like to basically tax people, and they don't like, they want to continue to give money away. And the tax system, in my opinion, is quite progressive. And if you look at compare it with, say, Western Europe, and the fact that we do not have a VAT here means that the way our taxes are structured are more progressive than in Western Europe, and it's not the zillionaires or whatever. It's forgotten that there's a death tax, a substantial one. And so what these zillionaires do is, I mean, if you think about it, you've got all the money you could possibly need to satisfy life possibilities. The government is going to take everything at your death. And so they cleverly start foundations for the public good. Maybe that's a better use of the money than letting the government just have it. But I think when this discussion goes on with zillionaires, the whole story of the death tax is forgotten, so it's cleverly excluded from any discussion that's going on in our political arrangement.
And I'd certainly agree with about the VAT. And every once in a while, American politicians will start tossing that around. And my immediate response is, let me see you exercise fiscal responsibility with the income streams you've already got, instead of trying to tap something else, assuring us that will cure the problem. Because sure as shooting, if they get another income stream, I will guarantee you they will not dedicate that stream to paying down the debt. They will use it to buy still more votes with still more pork.
And on both sides of the fence. And so you could make the case the Democratic Party is dispensing its goodies to its clients. And the Republicans, contrary, they're trying to encourage country club prosperity.
Well, it's just, I'd say that. Well, not even that. I mean, the Republicans distribute it to their friends too. It just
that's right. What I'm saying
the Republicans, it goes to Crystal City, and the Democrats.
Well, they might say, well, we're going to have some, I don't know, put some money into something that you'll be some financial benefit for our contributors.
I think what this leads toward is the question of should we have a balanced budget amendment, and of course Congress would never approve a balanced budget amendment, which leads us with the Article 5 convention process, whereby the states themselves would hold a convention and propose that amendment. But I think one of the greatest mistakes the founders made, the way that Article 5 of the Constitution is written, their intent was if 2/3 of the states were to tell Congress to call a convention that could propose amendments, Congress had to do that. You see words of command in Article 5. Congress shall call a convention. But Congress has thrown every roadblock that it can think of into the calling of that convention and simply refused to do it because they don't want that balanced budget amendment. Most of the calls for a constitutional amendment have been a balanced budget amendment, and Congress is, I would argue, unconstitutionally blocking an attempt to propose that amendment.
Well, I rarely dogmatic on issues, but I would be reluctant to support a balanced budget amendment. One reason being the Keynesian ideas about when the government should borrow money, and if you accept that logic, there are certainly times that they should do it. Now, the part that's left out of that is you should pay it back. So when things are better, then but there are times which they neglect to do, and
exactly.
And indeed, sort of circling back a little bit to our earlier discussion, the idea is that what can we do to have our economy flourish, our people happy, prosperous, and the different ideas about that from both parties totally neglect the national debt. They just don't pay any attention to it. And that's ultimately going to be a tremendous overhang on societal prosperity, or you could say capitalism, as far as that goes. Yeah. It becomes, when things become unsustainable. There are many examples. Greece would be one. Argentina, the government did whatever they could to extract money wherever it is, and now the tax system it has its problems. And one of the things that needs to we could talk about the good and bad ideas about tariffs, and also taxes, the good and bad things about taxes, the so-called Loeffler curve. And if you really tax people at an extraordinary high level, then you're going to stop
massive
revenue.
Disincentive, yeah.
And not only that, the people that are great risk takers, that are going to have really great innovative ideas, which is what makes the country what it is. So if you're in France, I mean, they do well with no problem with our French colleagues. Well, they're good with perfume and champagne or whatever else. I mean, and they do things, but not to the extent that Americans do. And the idea is, well, I've got a nice job at the post office, the French post office, and I can retire at 58. Well, that's the way their country works. Our country doesn't work like that. And I think Americans have the idea, well, if, I don't know, who's a very wealthy person?
Elon Musk.
Right. If he can make his $29 trillion, so can I. And more power to him. And he did it himself. I mean, it was not inherited, and he just got out and did it. And I want that possibility for myself, my family. That's the kind of country we have. And I don't feel intimidated by capitalists, because I can do that, and
the American dream.
And so a rigid class system, which taxes, in my opinion, promote. They promote a rigid class system because it makes capital accumulation just about impossible. If you have, well, I'm going to, start, a home freezer company, and I've got to raise money, and the government is taking 80% of my anything I earn. It's impossible to get any kind of capital accumulation. I can't do anything, and if people do have capital, the taxes are so extraordinary, they just tend not to use it appropriately. And as a result, the class system becomes more powerful, and in a way, social tension increases. And I think we see that in Western Europe. I mean, why are people out there, hey, I'm a peasant, I'm a worker, and that's the way my family are peasants, workers. We're just always that way, and there's nothing we can do about it. And to make our life better, we'll demand the government give us an extra hamburger. I mean, and that system, getting there in this country would be a difficult trip. Not to say that it might not happen.
Well, I've got to back up with you for a minute, and I think you put your finger on a very important point when you talk about the Keynesian idea that sometimes borrowing is necessary, but our politicians somehow forget to the second half of that equation. And the balanced budget amendment is designed to address that problem. And it could be, it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be, or I imagine it wouldn't be, Congress has to balance the budget every year. It could be something like the habeas corpus provision, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended except in cases of insurrection or invasion, public necessity shall require. I mean, you could put a fudge factor in there. But the problem is that national debt, we can talk about theoretically free trade or lower taxes or Lafleur, but the problem is with that national debt, we are committed to something like the system we've got now until we can pay that debt down. After that, once we get it down to zero or even close to zero, at this point, when Reagan oversaw the huge budget deficits, $4 trillion, Democrats thought it was the end of the world. I would love to have a $4 trillion national debt right now, which tells you something. Once we get down to that level, we can go back to the drawing boards and maybe rediscuss things. But until then, we're going to have to do something to even things out.
Well, right now in Congress, there's legislation there that every so often they have to approve the budget shortfalls. And so we go through this.
The continuing resolutions.
Right, and so every 6 months it happens, and so there are efforts underway to do that. The problem is that it just doesn't seem to be practical, and one reason it's not practical is the country can't stand the pain, which is an issue. I mean, right now, are we ready for a 10% drop in our standard of living, which certainly could happen? And if there were such a drop, wouldn't every politician that was on the ship, when it hit that iceberg, they would all drown, basically?
Yeah,
so a new order would happen.
Yes.
if the, quote, American people were forced into bad economic distress.
And we've got to start winding down here, but that does, I'm sure I have mentioned my analogy of temporal musical chairs in here before, that you view every generation of politicians as one of the participants in musical chairs, and all of them are hoping, gee, I hope I'm not in office when the music stops, because I may be the one left without a chair. And so in common parlance, the system is designed to encourage them, to incentivize them to kick the can down the road. And Judgment Day is coming, and I would argue, and I'd hope you would agree, that no matter how painful it is to deal with it now, it's going to be worse eventually if we don't deal with it. If not for us, then for our children or for our children's children. I think it's a pretty cruel thing to say, well, that's their problem, not ours. But on that note, we have to
let me just add.
Yeah.
Let me add a comment or two. So, what do the politicians that are guiding the ship? What do they imagine is going to be the salvation? So one thing would be an enormous increase in the GNP. So maybe suddenly the ability of the productivity of the country would just enormously increase. And they could use the increase in the nation's productivity to pay things off. The other thing would be inflation. So if you, and right now, all those people that borrowed money could be tricked by the government. Oh, I've got a 2% bond, 40-year bond or something. Well, we're just going to inflate the hell out of our currency, and we'll take care of the debt. And the third way that basically the politicians imagine they can continue to do this is that we're the reserve currency, and the rest of the world is even more screwed up than we are.
And each one of these, and I hate to wrap up, but each one of these presents its own perils, its own risks, and its own possibilities. But I think we'll have to discuss that next time around.
Well, once again, thank you for your presence, Buck.
Thank you, sir.
Go forth and
Indeed.
continue to live.
Right.